Okay. Okay. I don't know where's me playing with this one. I normally use it. Okay, so comrades, welcome once again. So this will be our second to last class. We have a class next week. And we just have a little bit of material in there. And as I said last week, I think I'm going to wrap a film around that piece of material. I won't say what it is right now, but I'm going to wrap something around it. And I can talk more about it before I show it, because it's quite powerful, I believe. However, thinking of power, right? And this section on power to the people, I'm hoping we've had a chance to take a look at them in the tutorials, but at the same time, I also know that the tutorials, this is a time where we, we take in the material as well, but we also take into account, the way in which it sits with us in terms of our lives, right, and everything we do. So that's our love between ourselves in the tutorials, with our comrades here, right, and every one of us and each other, right. And so you've heard me talk about then, and you'll see that in the material, right? We see that in terms of organizing and communicating with the people, right? Black Panther newsletter, for example, right? Elaine Brown talking about intercommunalism, right? Huey's theoretical framework, right? Put into practice, right? Everything that we do and everything the Panthers did and everything revolutionary organizations did, right? Going back 50 plus years, right? So we claim that, right? We claim that those histories of struggle, right? So I talked about, reference to comrades, and we speak to each other, right? And we communicate with each other along those lines. And we talked about how language then has meanings, right? Language sort of has meanings in terms of conceptual ways of thinking about the world, right? New possibilities, new ways of being, new ways of knowing, right? And comrades, as we know, is one of that part of that language of revolution, right? Where we understand each other and relate to each other, not as individuals, but as collectives, right? In struggle, right? Involved in political struggle, right? And you're seeing those little clips, right, of our grade 5 and 6 comrades, right, at Nelson Mandela Park School, right, where our folks fully understand that concept, comrades, we fully understand the politics of it, right, and the power of it, right, where we no longer scramble over each other for a few bit of crumbs, or no longer try to form our identities by putting each other down using colonial ways of knowing and doing. Now we're a collective, we're a family, right? And we defend each other along those lines. You defend me and I defend you, right? And it's a part of our lives, right? It lives with us and sits with us, right? And then we think about how that then impacts, right, those who go after us, right? Those folks who can become revolutionaries in the future, right? So that's what this section then is about. And my comrades are here, right? I have my comrades here, right? Not sort of friends or allies, right? But comrades who will stand by me, right? And defend me as I will defend them and defend, and they will defend me as collectives, not as individuals, right? And there's love in that, right? Real revolutionary, snotty, bloody, messy love, right? Involved in that, right? So again, we don't want to talk about this as a theoretical fucking exercise or something maybe you'll get a good grade at, right? It's a part of our lives, right? Part of where we want to go, as Fred said, right? In the future, where we want to end up. So enough for me, right? I will say, and so therefore it is such a blessing, right? For me to have, and to have these, for us to have these comrades here, right? In this moment, right? In this time, because it will never be the same again, right? We cannot repeat this again, right? This is now, and this is new, and this is revolutionary, right? So I want to say, first of all, a big hand for our folks here. Chris, Kevin, Isaiah, Nichole, right? Comrades, right? Who will talk about life, work, and community, right? And as we've talked about before, all of it is wound up and bound up, right? In the same way, right? Entangled with each other, community, life, work, right? So we go back to Lila Watson's piece about, if you come to help me, then you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is tied up with mine, then let's work together, right? That's comrades, that's life and living, right? So I'm going to ask my comrades now to talk about their lives, right? Inextricably interconnected with their work inextricably interconnected, right? With their lives. And all of that inextricably interconnected with community and collectivity, right? And the defense of that, right? And the struggle for that, right? And a struggle for becoming new peoples, right? So, shut up now, stand, and I will introduce my comrades here. Who would like to go first? Chris? So, Chris Ramsaroop. Yeah.
Okay, how much time do you guys?
So we go to 5 o'clock, right?
Okay.
So I'm thinking maybe half an hour each, right?
Right, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm gonna try to speak. What's up, yo? I want to apologize to my 342 peeps. I think I scared the hell out of you last class. I apologize if I traumatized everybody. So I'm Chris. I've been around campus for a very long time, unfortunately. One way or the other. Only teaching in the last couple of years. Never thought this would happen, but it did. I just want to follow up with my comrade just to said about language, discourse, and ideology, especially in the university. So I'm going to rant, I should say, about universities. I'm going to go back through memory lane, if I could figure out how to use these bloody things properly. I'm going to show you the stuff we used to do here in the 90s on campus. I'm going to talk about language and discourse and ideology. What the hell do I mean? Was at New College Council the other day, and one of these administrators had tried to do something kind of, for most people would not be seen sneaky, right? But I caught on immediately. Universities are publicly funded universities. Universities are publicly funded, plain and simple. Now, why is that important for all of you? Well, that's because the primary responsibility is as a provincial. It's not a private institution. Every couple of years, jokers in the administration, either central administration in Simcoe Hall or other parts, would try to change that language. It's very minuscule, very small. But anytime they talk about publicly assisted or publicly funded with a little dot or an exclamation mark, they have other means what they're talking about. And what they're talking about is privatization, increasing tuition fees, talking about more student debt. So, I had to immediately do something right there and then. It kind of seemed odd to everybody around the table. I'm usually a weirdo, but I was even more of a weirdo this time for this little stupid thing about a little exclamation mark or a little comment. But words have meaning, right? And particularly the ideology of neoliberalism in our universities. Now, I want to be clear, and of course, citing academic freedom, some of the most precarious faculty, we apparently have that. I don't like administrations, I don't like authority, and I want to encourage you to all understand, and I want to be straight up, universities do not have to run the way they run, plain and simple. This does not have to be what an education system is. All right? So what the hell do I mean about that? Tuition fees does not have to be $10,000 for an arts and science degree. Med Sci or a law degree doesn't have to be $50,000. It's not, quote, normal. And I apologize for anybody who gets offended by the term. It's not normal to have people accepting $100,000 or $200,000 debt to come to university. It is not acceptable for a student from another country who's been, I won't say victim, but because of our colonial systems, right? And what we've done in the global north, the countries of the global south. For them to come here for our education system to pay $60,000 or $70,000. It is not an acceptable form of education where to meet the needs of an institution, to meet the needs not of any of us here or you, but a central administration who keeps increasing their salaries and basically having their little pet projects, it is not acceptable for an education system to be this way. So language about how they try to frame the education system as a system of privatization, as an individual responsibility where you have to bear responsibility and not of a society. The ideology of neoliberalism, which I'll talk a little bit, and I can get a few of you from my other class to talk about Michael Klass's reading if you'd like. And the discourse about education here. You are not consumers, plain and simple. You are not a consumer of an education. This is not just simply about getting a job afterwards. This is about creating consciousness and transformation. This is about ensuring that our education system, like a healthcare system, is a right. It's not a privilege to be here. It's an honor, of course, to be here to exchange ideas, but everybody should have a right to be in a place like this, okay? And we've seen many times over the last couple of decades the way the university has tried to create divisions, create tensions, and to say that certain bodies do not belong in places like this. Now, I told you all I scared the crap out of my third-year students, and I was showing a video called On Strike, the Struggle for Ethnic Studies in California. And the video was based from an organization called the Third World Liberation Front that did a lot of amazing work in California to talk about the necessity of changing our academic work. What the hell is the relationship for all of us in this room? It's important for all of us to understand that it's just not that we're lucky or happy to be in an equity studies class. This was a struggle, this was a fight, this was a sacrifice. It's been built on generations of people before us who sacrificed their lives, sacrificed their careers, and even sacrificed choices that they would make to make sure that we have equity studies programs across the continent. So it's not just that this is something university wants us to have. This was a space that was fought. And I do remember 1997, 98, when the first programs were here. And I remember Pangl and Orwin. These were two political theorists. If you ever do Paul 200, they used to, they're not with us anymore. But people like that were very opposed, strongly opposed for the introduction of equity studies. And to extent African studies, Caribbean studies, women and gender studies, LGBTQ studies, disability studies, these were not seen as part of the academic canon that universities want. And it was only when people like all of us here said, no, we want something different. We can never devoid what's happening in the outside world and the larger political context from what's happening here as well too, when we think about censorship, right? What is happening in Palestine is having a tremendous impact on us as well too. So the idea of what dissent is and academic freedom, particularly at this point, is paramount for us to understand how do we resist and fight back. Now I'm going to go a little bit of yap about who I am, and then I will I'll talk a little bit about this ideology, and then I'm going to go back memory lane. So who am I? The first thing I love to tell all my students, I almost got expelled about 12 years ago for protesting. So we got criminal charges, and I was on the verge of expulsion with about 14 other students. I was involved in other sit-ins before that, but very much how they treated a bunch of racialized. Well, they were kids. I was much older at that time, but I was a grad student. But how they treated a bunch of non-white people versus white people engaging in sit-ins was very much different. The sit-in was about freedom of speech, dissent, tuition fees, the war, and the way that the university ran. So a bunch of kids, there was about 15 or 20 people decided to do a sit-in. We didn't make it into the governing council. We made it in the governing council building, but not into the president's office. And they threw the book, right? This is something that I thought was unheard of at that time. But they basically tried to have us all expelled. A few of us went to court, and our charges were stayed, which means dropped in effect. And Aziz Chowdhury, which some of you may study later on, I want you to consider the role of activism not just simply as activism, the act of doing, but it's the act of knowing, reflecting, and knowledge production. So one of the things, if anybody's ever been involved in any type of organizing, think about the way you could do a Freedom of Information request to try to get document, to see what the other side has on you. So part of these projects is I'm also trying to see how they try to police bodies, police dissent. So I let everybody know about that. First thing is about being expelled. I also, I guess, on a typical so-called, if you saw my resume, you would think I would have been, part of the CEO club. I was president of UTSU. It was called the Student Council back then. We ran on the ticket to basically rabble cause trouble. I was on the executive director of Society Students Union. APIS, the part-time, I was president there. Governing council, the people who actually voted on your tuition fees, I was on that for a couple years, causing trouble. OPERG. And our idea wasn't necessarily just about resume padding. It wasn't just about saying that, hey, this is going to look great for whatever, getting involved in liberals or conservatives or the NDP or getting on Bay Street. It's about saying that something's fundamentally wrong with who's involved, the voice of students, where are the racialized people on this campus, and why does the university keep going in a direction that doesn't seem what most of us in this room want? So we'd always looked at this type of work as a project of organizing. But the problem, of course, with any type of activism on campus that all of you are going to probably come across is that after 4 years or 5 years or 11 years like me, you're gone. And the next generation has to figure out what happened beforehand. So the way that student organizing and activism happen, and even faculty work, it's very short term. And none of us have been very good at trying to lay the foundation so you don't make the same mistakes or fuck up like how we did. So it's important for us to think about why this history is. So I'm not just telling you this because, I want to waste your time, but learn some of the lessons, learn what we did was fun, learn the stuff that we did was not good. Don't burn out. Try to have a balance in life. Make sure you're healthy and you don't sacrifice yourself for the so-called cause, which I know is kind of counter to what a lot of other people would say. Build community, build friendship, build love. Don't think of this as as a competition amongst people, right? You're not there to be the best individual activist or the best organizer, right? And when I say about burning out, sometimes this becomes, particularly with men, it becomes this thing, this competition about who is the best activist, right? And a lot of the racialized women, or people who identify as women, fall off. They burn out, and they seem that people can't handle it. And that's a very flawed way of looking at it. Very much activist spaces reproduce our neoliberal agenda. So that's something that we all have to really challenge of how we do stuff. So the role of neoliberalism. I know that my fourth years and my first years still struggle with that term. Do you all want me to go a bit about what neoliberalism is, or do you have a kind of a basic understanding? And you should care. Oh, sorry?
Explain.
Okay, I'm going to say very shortly. I'm not going to gap too much. Okay. So this is from class and this is actually one of the readings I gave, and Mike teaches here in the Faculty of Environment, and he does a lot of food courses. So this is from his writings, looking at the neoliberal challenges to both food on campuses as well as education. So there's much debate of the conceptual, theoretical, practical contours of what constitutes neoliberalism. However, there's a broad consensus that, as Brennan Theodore put it, the linchpin of neoliberal ideology is a belief that open, competitive, and unregulated markets, liberated from all forms of state interference, represents the optimal mechanism for economic development, or simply, all good comes from the market. Blah, 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 boring, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. So what does that reflect with all of you? Number one, when we think about an education system, it's not people who are ideologues, and there's people here in this university, there's people who sit on the board of governors, it's a lot of people who think they're doing good, but they're actually doing more harm to society, think that there's more of an individual benefit. Each of you are benefiting from your education and not society. And as such, it's used to justify higher tuition fees, less government subsidies, and a change in an academic setting where the motivation of academics is towards either partnerships with business and industry or government, or towards some other idea about profit-driven or the markets. Other people, like I'm going to assume, for all of us, we have a very different understanding of what our education system is. It's about building a dignified society. It's about addressing the role of the institutions as imperialist colonial institutions. It's about trying to be inclusive and building so we do not do more harm to our societies. So it's very different visions. But the neoliberals, they're in higher education at OISE, they're in the economics department, poli-sci, all over the place, right? People are producing knowledge to talk about the role of individuals and the individual benefits of our education system. What also means about the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. So when people are giving lots of money to the University of Toronto, most of us might think that's a great thing. But when there's strings attached about what bodies can actually teach those courses and what can actually be researched or taught, then we should be really concerned about that. And a couple of years ago, there was an incident at the Faculty of Law that was exposed. I'm sure there's many, many others. But the role of our education system and the role of academic freedom is also under assault from the role of the neoliberal ideology. The other thing that universities want is, if all of you have an expression, if you want to basically talk about what you want, or us, or as precarious faculty, they basically hold the idea of contract jobs or late tuition fees as a way to try to muzzle freedom of dissent or freedom of speech and dissent on campuses. So a lot of other faculties who have contracts don't have necessarily the ability to speak out, and particularly on critical issues, whether it's Palestine, the role of the universities, academic hirings, or the role of the way that they teeth your tuition fees. So this is the way that I wanted to encapsulate how ideology plays out in our university system. Now, I want to be clear, I didn't start off, I was actually, I apologize. When it came to University of Toronto, I was a member of the Liberal Party, I was a young Liberal. So I thought I was going to go join the Liberal Party, end up being like on government, being a cabinet minister, that type of stuff. And I thought that was my path. And then I came to university, started to hang out with a bunch of peeps who were like out there and wacky. And I thought there was something truthful, right? This wasn't just about people trying to position themselves as this great person, but really making mistakes, laughing, and trying to really be there for what they believe the cause of students were. So part of us, and we weren't, many of us, I joined ASU at that time, but many of us weren't part of any revolutionary party. We weren't part of any group. We just wanted to basically cause trouble, have fun, and hold the people who had power to account. So some of us were in ASU, others in the Graduate Students Union, the Women and Women and Trans Center. It was called the Women's Center back then. OPERG. It was a bunch of other eclectic people, right? And I want to show some of the stuff that we did. And just let me know when you want me to shut up, all right? Okay, so now I have to say, this was way before, so this was the cutting edge back then, way back when the 90s, websites. So what we did, U of T has their main website, so we just created our own thing. Paul Sang is still on campus, and Alana O'Hayan. Paul Sang was one of the people who developed this. Pritchard, the guy on the left, was the president of the University of Toronto. He went on to cause lots of other problems in the world. I think he's privatizing CBC, this high rail that's happening between Toronto and, he's part of that privatization process there. Metrolinx is a private entity, so he was Mr. Public-Private Partnership, right? He was our president of the university. We occupied his office a couple times, and we didn't like anything that he stood for. So there's a lot of things that were going on campus at that time. There was a big racism case. Oh, is that not working?
I think you're right-clicking.
Oh, that worked? Mm-hmm. So Dr. Chen was a big racism case that was going on. Dr. Chen was denied tenure four times. And throughout my academic career, we had fought this case. And it was basically anti-Asian racism within the physics department, but also in the Faculty of Arts and Science. And it was an entire organizing campaign that we went to the board of directors of the university, we would disrupt it, we would engage in all different actions. The case got resolved a couple of years later, but it was a tremendous organizing of students, faculty, the community, and it brought people together to basically look at the hirings on our campus. The University of Toronto today will probably highlight and be like, yes, we've done a great job in EDI. Many of us will question that and say this is not about just mimicking colonial powers, but thinking about how many racialized indigenous bodies, black bodies are still in positions of precariousness with the university. So this is definitely something, and history repeats itself, y'all. This is not just something from the past. This is something that should be informing the way that we do our work today. Okay, how do I go back? This is like deja vu for all my other students.
Maybe click down there. I know, I probably.
Okay, cool. So I might need you again, brother. So as I said, so Dr. Chen was an important case, and it was just not simply talking about racism against an individual. It was really challenging the entire way that hirings were happening on campus. So at that time, U of T was actually a little more transparent about their data. So we were able to really get in their face, but we also connected to tuition fees, curriculum, privatization universities. And it was hilarious because they didn't know what the hell to do, right? Because we were showing up to everything to disrupt as much as possible. But we linked it to other aspects as well too, as I was talking about. We did a sit-in, and I know we could talk about that a little bit later. Let me see if this is the other thing too. All right, so I'm going to talk about the National Week of Action. And I talked a bit to my third-year students yesterday, I believe. Now, what these neoliberals will try to do, all right? They're going to try to sell you a couple dreams. The dream of debt, to say that having debt is not a bad thing. Robert Prigeno, who was the president after this character, we had a meeting when I was in the governing council. And he was talking to the students being like, look, it's not a bad idea. We just have to make sure to educate, to inform, to ensure that our students in Canada know it's okay to have a $50,000 debt or $100,000 of debt. Is that okay for anybody in this room? You want $100,000 debt? Okay. So the university administrators were actually trying to ensure that you feel comfortable with this. This, of course, is part of something called, and they've had this idea that you would pay part back of this debt based on whatever income you made. And it's called an Income Contingency Loan Repayment Plan, ICLRP, right? But the problem with these type of things is if you have a really bad job after university, you're probably going to be paying interest a much longer period than somebody who's more affluent. So very much, these type of loans perpetuate inequalities. So around my time, well, my first time, as I said, I've been here forever, there was a massive protest around campus, and these are some of the things that happened. These are the organizations. We had a larger group of people that would get together and to protest. We started our own organization called Student Action Crew, and we did a lot of just kind of creative troublemaking on our campus. The student leaders, anybody ever had a student leader award here? I don't want to use the term, the SLUT awards. Anybody ever get nominated, the student council types? Which are a big thing. University still has these type of things, right? Everybody used to go to the president's house, have the party, they'll get drunk, it was this like thing. Every student leader possible, hundreds and hundreds of people. So we're like, screw this. We should not be celebrating anything with the university when they're trying to do a tuition hike. So what we did a couple years ago, well, way back when, we organized a soup kitchen outside this place, right? To talk about, we don't want to be associated with them. A lot of students are going in debt because of what the university's policies are. So way back when, we weren't just looking at typical protests, but trying to do other types of creative actions to embarrass, to shame. And a lot of student leaders were crossing, they had to kind of turn away because we're like, are you actually here for the students and here for people that that you're supposed to represent, or just here to get some award from the university? So it was pretty fun to organize and do those type of things as well too. Education Day of Action. Is this it? Yeah, this is it, I think. No, I'm not going to show you that one. All right. Well, there was another. Okay, maybe this is not going to work for me. Well, maybe it will. George, actually, who goes to Monk here? Anybody goes to the Monk Center? Anybody international relations or poli-sci, the Monk's school on campus? Anybody know what the history of that is? All right, so basically, and maybe I'll close off with this story, and then I could do some other stuff later on. So, anybody know what a kickback is? Kickbacks? Kickbacks are usually associated with shoddy people, right? We see about Queen's Park or Parliament, but universities have their own types of kickbacks. So many years ago, Joseph Rotman, Rotman Center for Commerce, I make sure I have to get the story right, but Rotman was on the board of governors of the University of Toronto. And of course, he donated lots of money to the Rotman Center for Commerce. And also on his board was Peter Monk and George Bush Sr., okay? So, Peter Monk, who's no longer with us, he's this big mining dude, right? If you don't know him, causes a lot, gets lots of money, exploits a lot of people across the world, lots of violations. So, he gave $6.4 million to set up the Monk School of International Relations on Devonshire. So $6.4 million. But part of the kickback was that George Bush Sr. would have to get an honorary degree. All right, do people know who George Bush Sr. is? Anybody? Former President of the United States? So when we found out, all hell broke loose on campus. People were just like, this is crazy. Why the hell is this person getting a degree? So thousands of people basically got together to organize, to challenge, this way that corporate-driven universities are run, to say that, who represents the best interests of this university, and to say that this was not acceptable, plain and simple. So we'd organized a massive, and the faculty at that time, and there was a lot of, what do you call those famous people? Not the celebrity types, the people who get those big words, the Nobel people, Nobel types who at U of T were basically organized a walkout. All right, so I'm just going to show you a bit of that.
It opened up there.
Oh, where? Here? Oh yeah. Okay. No.
I think you're just right clicking for it.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, okay. All right. So. Is that right?
Yeah, it's going.
Okay. So this is a varsity. And newspapers, student media is critically important. Now, I cannot underestimate the value. And it shows an important archive, right? So this is George Bush getting his damn honorary degree. There's thousands of people outside of Hart House because they decided to organize and put it at Hart House. Oh no, this is not the one. Anyways, the other pictures that were part of this is all the faculty standing up, walking out of the ceremony. Right? To say that this is not who we want to be associated with, and this is not what the values of social justice-minded people are. So inside, this was all going on. Outside, thousands of people were rallying, and some people might have been throwing snowballs. I hear these things, I don't know. But it was a really rowdy day. And of course, U of T, the most important thing for anybody who decides to do work, doesn't matter if you're doing legal work, political work, scientific work, medical work, the thing that your opponents do not want is that to be embarrassed. U of T very much cares about its image. So this basically was this huge, huge blight on the university institution. They expected people just to accept this, but not to be dissent. And they didn't expect for thousands of faculty and students, the community in general, people from Guatemala, people who were from Iraq, people who were basically faced the war crimes of the United States and other colonial powers, to basically start organizing in Toronto. So it was a way to try to bring people together, mobilize, and once again, it wasn't just a few people. I don't want to close this. So number one, people were creative. Number two, people wanted to question and challenge authority and say that things were not okay in our campuses. Number three, it was also about developing alternative forms of knowledge and forms of resistance. And I hope that some of these lessons lead you today to understand that you're just not somebody sitting in a classroom. If you believe in your third or fourth year that there's something fundamentally wrong with this university, I encourage you to talk to us, to think about how you could come together and to really hold these people to account. Because this is, once again, not the way that a university should be running and operating, particularly in these times. So I'll close off there, and thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Did they literally just got up and walked out?
Right during the ceremony.
And what happened after that? Did anything change?
Yes and no, right? Part of it is that the history, yes, there were some changes, and they learned their lesson, but the bastards, these sneaky people, expect after a couple years that they're just going to keep returning to do the same thing. So now a lot of their contracts are more hidden. They've done a lot of their private donations, and I could be wrong, but they have a separate financial entity that basically where they store a lot of their money. But just to give you one thing, U of T apparently last year had $500 million that they basically just a surplus. Now they're going to try to sugarcoat that in any goddamn way that they want. This is unacceptable for a public institution to go be basically putting it in God knows where. So maybe that's the best way to answer. In the short term, yes, but they expect people's history to be forgotten. People like myself will see as a relic and you should just laugh at. But we have to challenge these things. This should be going to pay off student debt or tuition fees or faculty or ensure that our universities are inclusive. So.
Okay, I stand in the wrong place to follow what Chris
That's
said.
not true. You're amazing. You blew me away last year.
Okay, so I have to confess, I came here today with what I had prepared last year, which was kind of,
That's okay.
yeah, it's academic integrity offense, but I hope you all forgive me. I think only a couple of you have heard it before. But why I was asked to come here today came through conversation with Stan, actually, that last year, so for those of you that don't know me, there's some familiar faces here. My name is Kevin. I teach in Caribbean Studies and Community Engaged Learning. So we're comrades in lots of different ways. One of the marginalized programs across the street that's affiliated with Nichole. So what I was talking about with Stan and actually with my students last year was, it was kind of the first time I ever told them my background story as to how I ended up here. So that was something I was doing because I realized coming out of COVID, teaching online for the last 2.5 years or whatever, that like things that you used to take for granted, that students would come and talk to you after class. You would get to know them a little better. You know, you could go for a coffee, go for lunch, whatever, just hang out in the hallway. That didn't happen because people didn't feel comfortable, right? Everything was broken in that sense. So when I came back in person, what I said is I'm gonna start talking to students and actually be a bit more vulnerable with them about what's going on, because a lot of the conversations I was having with students was about the seriousness of kind of the issues they were dealing with. And that was 1 or 2 students, but as I was able to talk more and be open with students, I realized that was a lot of students. But they don't feel that school, university, professors, you know, fellow students, there's a place for them to come and actually talk about these kinds of stuff. So they carry those kinds of struggles on their own, and a lot of students, sadly, they don't necessarily make it to the finish line, right, with this, because things pile up, it can be overbearing, and you give up and you say, fuck it, I can't do all this. I need to live. School seems like a luxury for me right now. And that was why I made an intervention to start talking to them and say, hey, I know that all of us that are up here, and you know, those of us that are teaching here, we don't often talk about ourselves as students or what it took for us to get here. And so I figured that was a good thing to try and do. So what I ended up doing, how this came about was, like I said, COVID, and then I formalized it because I had to apply for my job back here, and they asked me to do like a equity statement. So I had to be like, all of the reasons why I should be the candidate versus all the other people. So I just said, I don't really know what to say to this. You know, I don't like these kinds of exercises. I don't think they're necessarily helpful. That they would have like a ranking list of like, well, this person's story is the most heartbreaking, and this person, for whatever reason, it doesn't resonate with me, I'm putting it at the bottom of the pile. I'm not saying context and that is not important, but it's really in like a transactional sense, that you're selling yourself and like the struggle to other people. So I was thinking about writing that, and I said, oh, I'll just give it to my students instead. I'll get feedback from them. And what ended up happening is that the students really opened up and started to tell me things that were going on with them. So I used it as an exercise. I didn't do it this year because I took over a class in the middle of the term. So sorry, Kathy, that I didn't share this with you and Mariah. But yeah, so how I ended up here as a professor, right? I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here at all. When I say that I should not be in university, that is not a lie. When I say I should not be standing here, that is not a lie. I should not be alive if I'm being honest. Because the way that I grew up and how I grew up, the people I grew up with, looking back at it, it's crazy to think about how a group of friends, a group of people that I grew up in community, our parents, our cousins, our uncles, things like that, I just looked at it as bad luck. We made bad decisions. We brought this on ourselves because that's what we were told a lot of times, right? So for me growing up, when I was in elementary school, a lot of us, they didn't have streaming then. They've got rid of it technically. Has anyone ever heard of streaming in high school? Where they identify kids and they say, this is normally when you go into high school, but they'll take you and they'll say, well, you're bright, you have a promising future, we're gonna put you on like the accelerated path or go to university. And then there was a medium track called general. So advanced is the top, general is everybody else almost. and then there's basic. So basic was where I got put. Because they said, you know, we think you have all kinds of learning disabilities, you're always getting into trouble, you're always talking, telling jokes, you come late to class, you don't, whatever. But from when I was probably about grade 5, I noticed that me and my friends, we were always getting pushed aside, right? That we were getting taken and put in special ed classes when we were really young, when it was actually, we didn't have anything wrong with us, it was just the teacher was frustrated with us, right? We were bored, we would act up in class. That pattern carried through to high school. My parents didn't really know. They trusted the teachers, right? So my parents are immigrants, they came here. My family's from St. Lucia, my mom's side. So she thought the teachers knew what they were doing because she's like, yeah, well, you know, you're a stubborn kid, you're a troublemaker at home, so I'll believe the teacher with what they're saying. The impact of that was that me and my friends, when we went to high school, what we found when we were there is that there was no space for us in high school. That it was really, we were there, they asked us to come on the track team, to play football, to play basketball. We went there to go talk to girls, sell weed, and drink, and go to parties. There wasn't any, because we believed what they had told us about ourselves, right? I didn't like school, and they made sure to let me know that they didn't want me there, and that it didn't fit. So it wasn't very long before I got kicked out of school. My friends got kicked out of school. Not surprisingly, you're 15, 16, you don't have anything to do, you're gonna start to get into trouble. And we did that. I wasn't in a gang per se, but we had a crew of people that we had lots of time on our hands, we needed to make money. Not crazy amounts, but you know, we did what we did and we got into a lot of trouble. So a lot of the friends that I was with during that time, when I was young, when I say 15, 16, 17, 18 was when things kind of turned around for me. Where I grew up, we had friends, I don't know, some of you might know it's like that. You grow up, you know, older brothers, cousins, things like that. So they're involved in other stuff, right? And it's very easy for you to get caught up in things that they're doing, whether it's selling drugs, robbing places, stealing, doing all kinds of stuff. The younger kids are easily influenced and get involved, right? And this was in the early 2000s, right? So now it's kind of become news about kids stealing cars and doing stuff like that, robbing pharmacies. Like this was stuff we were doing way back in the days. Not all of it was me. I'm not putting myself in that in case anyone's gonna say it. But we did a lot of stupid stuff, right? We had friends that would try to rob gun stores and things like really knucklehead, stupid, dangerous things. Not because they were not good people, but looking back, it's because from a very early age, we were given up on, right? So I got into a lot of trouble, as you could imagine, kicked out of school, getting into fights, getting charges, on probation, breached probation, all kinds of stuff. And it got to a point where my mom's like, I don't know what to do with you because you're not listening. I try to keep you at home. You sneak out, you go see your friends, the cops bring you back home, and it was just a circle. So she says, I'm gonna send you back to St. Lucia. You're gonna go stay with your grandfather and see what's up. So that ended up happening. I went back, it wasn't very long, it was maybe about a month that I was there. And while I was there, I had a cousin. He was like the top scholar in St. Lucia. He was like I think it was the 4th highest. And every year, the top 3 students in St. Lucia got a full scholarship to go to the University of the West Indies. St. Lucia doesn't have a university, right? So my cousin was there, and he was 4th, right? And he had a dream, he wanted to be a lawyer, brilliant person, probably one of the smartest people I ever met. Like really focused, really sharp from a young age, and was always on the straight and narrow. It was a really good influence to me, and I didn't realize necessarily everything that he was doing at the time. But yeah, so I saw that my cousin didn't get into university. So they're basically saying to him, because my family couldn't pay the tuition for him to go. It was because you gotta go abroad, you gotta pay the regular fees and stuff. They said, you know, we can't do that. They tried to figure things out, selling land, do stuff, whatever, but it didn't work. So he just said, yeah, cool, like I'm gonna go do what I have to do. I'm gonna go get a job and start working. But I have a lot of cousins back home that it's a whole other story, but they used to be coming from an agricultural community where we grew bananas. My family, my grandfather, they all grew bananas. But in the mid-90s, the United States basically destroyed the St. Lucian economy, stopped them, literally stopped them from selling bananas to England. So that's one of the reasons why we left and we ended up in Toronto. But while I was up here, a lot of my family were struggling with that as well. Some of them moved away, but some of them didn't. and they were trying to grapple with what was going on. So I had a lot of cousins that were involved, unfortunately, in selling drugs. And my cousin who was supposed to, the very bright one who was supposed to go, he ended up getting a job driving a pasta truck around the island, making deliveries. And my other cousins who were selling cocaine at the time said, oh, perfect. No one's gonna expect, you know, my cousin to be involved in this kind. We're gonna get him to go around and deliver stuff around the entire island. It's the perfect cover. Ends up doing that, right? Because he's like, yeah, I'm gonna make a little bit more money. And he was planning to go to school, to use that money to go to school, right? To save it and then get his tuition and then go. He ends up getting killed, right? So that was a moment for me where I'm like, okay, this stuff can switch really easy, and that's someone that's much smarter than you and doesn't have as much opportunity as you. What are you doing with your life, okay? So that was a pivotal moment for me. Alongside when I came back, my uncle, he was my aunt's husband, but my uncle, he saw a lot of the stuff I was getting up to. He grew up kind of, he's a good guy, 1 foot in the street, but he knew what was going on, right? And he pulled me aside and he's like, yo, you need to figure out what's happening, because he's like, you're going down a really bad path really quickly, and if you keep this up, you're not going to be around. I said, okay. And he said, no, you need to start learning about what's going on. It's not enough to just keep your head down and going around. He says, you need to learn. So he gave me a book, and he says, I think this book will talk to you, because you're not listening to anyone else. Like, you're just confident to make your own mistakes. And he's like, you're not always going to be around to do that. You know, you're not going to have a long life if you do that. So I said, okay. He gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X, right? And he says, read it. Figure stuff out. Look at it. He says, I'm not saying near this at all, but he's like, about an angry young man on a self-destructive path, how he can turn it around. Right? He says, read it. So I read it. It literally changed my life. My son is named Malcolm because of that, right? Because that book actually showed me the reason why we were all mad, we were angry, we were doing all these kinds of stuff, and why we were actually kicked out of school and all had probation officers, guidance counselors. No one really gave a shit about us. You know, our parents tried. They didn't know. They were trusting the system, unfortunately, right? I think they would advocate a lot more knowing what they know now, seeing what we've gone through. But at the time, they listened to what they were told, right? And ended up going to what they call the ALC, Adult Learning Center, and finished my high school there, right? Back then we had grade 13, so I did that there. Ended up saying, I'm gonna go to university, right? So tried, applied to U of T. I remember dropping off my application, where it used to be the admissions office. It's somewhere else now, but where the high school is, you used to drop stuff off there. I remember went there, got my high school transcript and my letter and put it in the mailbox. I got a letter like 3 days later. I was like, I'm in. And it was a really short letter, and it said, no way, you're not close, right? So I was like, okay, you know, that's fine, okay, I'll try. Did a couple more courses, got into York. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because if I came to U of T as an undergrad, I would have left right away. Because it wasn't an environment where I had classes like this. It was super conservative. I like politics, political science, history, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying there's not good people in those places, but overall, it's not the most welcoming place if someone's trying to find themselves and figure out what's going on, right? And also, like Chris, having a problem with authority and stuff like that, right? They'll be like, shut up and listen, right? Don't ask questions. Don't bring the politics in. You know, so York was different. York, they were much more critical. The questions that I had and things that I brought, I wanted to learn about the Caribbean, what was happening, why my family was in the situation they were in. I was able to do that at York. So my education, I turned it into a way to actually understand what was happening to me, my community, my friends, my family, right? So that's where my passion for education actually came from. It wasn't because I'm like, I just like to learn stuff because, which is fine. But it was like, there's a sense of urgency about understanding what's happening because there's real consequences to this, right? And while I'm going to school, right, my friends are still in the same kind of situations. I'm the one that is going to school now when they're drinking, smoking, we're playing basketball, talking to them about politics. They're like, shut up. You know, we don't want to hear this stuff, right? But always doing that, being the annoying guy, right? The buzzkill for the party, right? They're all doing their own thing. And consistently they saw that, like, you know what? I'm starting to move in this direction. I'm taking it more seriously, but it's good for me, right? I had one friend out of the crew that I grew up with. There were 6 of us, right? One of them ended up later, he followed me. He went to similar kind of path, went to ALC, he ended up going to McMaster, finished at UTSC. But yeah, out of the 6 of us, 4 of us are no longer around. My friend Alistair, my friend Paul, my friend Ben, and my friend Freddie, they're all dead. Different reasons, but most of them is from violence. Because they didn't get out of this. There was times where it's like you need to choose a path, which way you're gonna go. Because of what they were involved in, they were into heavier stuff than me. They were deeper in than I was, right? I was always kind of, you know, in and out. And they were the bigger, tougher guys that I looked up to, and they stayed into that. So, like Freddie, for example, he went to prison up in Kingston. To me, he was the nicest guy, but he was someone we looked up to as a role model. Always had a nice car, nice girls, money, these kinds of things. He never told us exactly how he got into it. He tried to shield us from some of this stuff, right? But when he was up there, he said, oh man, can't believe who I was bunking with. They had such good ideas about how to make money when I come out. He ended up actually being one of the people that robbed pharmacies. He's robbing opioids because he says, why am I gonna go jack somebody else that has a gun? Right, this was 20 years ago. The chances of me robbing another dealer and getting shot is quite high. If I go rob a pharmacist, it's some old Chinese lady, right? She's not gonna come and shoot me, so I'm basically getting off free, right? That was his, and this is what they're talking about. He went there actually for really minor stuff. From when he was in high school, he got into a fist fight, but then he broke probation several times and they put him up, like, it's pretty serious charges compounded. He didn't need to be there. But he ended up there. So he ended up going down this path, and he ended up getting shot, not because from the pharmacist, but because he got involved and hooked on opioids, right? And he kept doing robberies and stuff like that, and he didn't have this organized plan anymore, and he ended up getting killed, right? So a lot of these guys are not around that I grew up with. So I've seen that firsthand, how decisions that have been made when we were 15, 16 years old have consequences when we're 24, 25, 26, 30, if we're lucky to get there, right? So when I was at school, all of this was still happening around me. I didn't know what was going on in terms of where I would end up. I ended up, you know, using the education, learning, getting better at it. I had one professor, just one professor the whole time I was at York, who reached out and was like, hey, you never talk in class, you sit there with your hoodie, you smell like weed, you should come to the office because I want to talk to you about your paper. And I was like, oh man, she's gonna say that I didn't write it. I don't want to deal with this. So I didn't go the first week. Second week, she says, you know, where were you? You didn't come talk to me. And then I went, and she says, you need to talk more often. She says, like, I was always looking for who Kevin was, but you never talk, you never say anything, so I just thought, you know, you were a random person. And she's like, she's being nice, but she's like, I'm surprised that was you. I was like, okay. But she kept pushing me. She's like, you know what? You need to think about what you're doing after school, like when you graduate. She's like, do you have a plan? I said, nope. She says, why not? I said, why would I have a plan? I'm like, my plan was just to get through school. And then after that, like, you know, it's basically a bonus. And she says, no, that's not enough. You need to try and figure out where you're gonna go, what you're gonna do. Conversations I never had with anyone. I was the first in my family to go to university. I had no friends that went, so I didn't know. I thought when you graduated, things were just good, right? And she said, no, you know, you're gonna have your student loan come due, which is what Chris was talking about. You need to figure stuff out. But she's like, you have a lot of potential, don't waste it. Because she's like, I've seen this happen a lot of times, and you know, you don't want to go down that path. I said, okay. So, but I said, I do have my student loan. There's a lot of stuff happening in the community with my friends, stuff like that. I actually want to get out of here. Because right now, I'm not sure if I go back to hanging out with my friends, I will be around much longer. Because there's been times I've been hanging out with people, I was standing in a bus shelter, we got shot at, right? There's been things like that where it's very close. Twice I've been hanging out with people and I almost got shot. The second time was in front of the Eden Center. I never talk about this kind of stuff, right? Because it's always looked at as like a distraction to what the work that we're doing, right? Because some people sell it in that way, and I've always been kind of cautious. That's why I didn't tell anybody about this until like last year, right? So I really shouldn't be here. I ended up going to Korea, probably the furthest place that I could find, to go pay my OSAP get out of the situation I was in for a bit, and then I came back. But while I was over there, that same prof, she messaged me and she's like, hey, you need to apply for your master's. I said, why would I do that? I don't like school, right? She says, no. She's like, give it a chance. She's like, I have a feeling that if you come back and you just go work like an office job, stuff like that, like you're not gonna be happy and you'll regret it. I said, well, I'm not gonna get in. She said, just work with me. She says, if you apply, I'll help you. And I said, but I only have one person that knows me, which is you. I'm not gonna get a second letter, a third letter, fourth letter. I never was part of any clubs. My grades the first 3 years were not very good. So what am I gonna do? She says, don't worry about it. So she had a plan. She says, just work with me, trust me. She went out of her way to help me get into a program at Mac. She also made sure, she says, because money was an issue for me, that I said, I don't wanna have to be worrying about paying tuition, rent, this and that. That's how it's easy to get into trouble again, right? So if I'm gonna go, I need to be set. And she says, okay, so she says, make sure you apply for all these scholarships. I applied for a couple of them. I was waitlisted for a few of them. And then when I was coming back from Korea, I got an email, oh, you've been bumped off the wait list. We're gonna give you, it's called like a shirt master's scholarship, right? Which is good money. It's $17,500 to go do your master's, right? So I was like, I'll take that. And then the master's program gave money as well. So I was able to make it work. While I was there, it was 1 year, it went quick. And then the same prof was like, hey, you should apply for your PhD. I said, I'm not applying for I applied to U of T as well. I didn't get in for my master's. They gave no money, right? Or that's why I got in, but they gave no money. So I went to Mac. She said, after I did Mac, she says, you need to apply for your PhD. I applied for my PhD. I got waitlisted at U of T, right? Didn't get in either. So again, same thing, scholarships, ended up getting waitlisted. Someone turned it down, I got it. U of T said you can come in, right? So people pushing actually was really important. The community wasn't big, but having a community of people that actually pushed me to go forward and said, you know what? You can do it, we'll help you, we'll show you, we've been there, we can see something different than what you're seeing in front of you. That was actually really important, but I wouldn't have got that if I didn't take the chance to step out and actually get to know this professor. Because I could have easily just said, nah, I gotta catch the bus to go home, I gotta work. All of those things were true. I have friends I gotta see, I want to go see my girlfriend, whatever. All of those things were true. But because of the fact that I took the time to actually get to know one person, right? Out of all the thousands of people I probably met in my undergrad, she actually made a huge difference and opened up so many doors, put me in touch with people like Alyssa Trotz, who was a former student at York, right? And she took me under her wing when I was here, helped me, long story short, you know, did my PhD, ended up getting a job here, right? That it worked like that, but I'm not telling you that this is how everything good happens, like, you know, the importance here is community, right? Building community, because there's a lot of people, my uncle, right? My friends, my cousin that I lost, a lot of people that were actually there for me, that steered me back on the path when I was going off in the wrong direction, right? I'll stop because time's going a lot faster than I thought. But yeah, so what I'm saying to you as students, as to people, as friends, comrades, is that we are also people like you. We're not just, you know, you think, oh, you're standing behind the podium, there's some kind of distance between us. It's not true. Like, I might not know everything you're going through, and guaranteed there's experiences I don't know and I can't feel the same way as you. But some of it, I can guarantee you I can meet you where you are, right? And I can help you and work through it. Because I see far too many people do what I was going to do, which was to not bother. To just say, whatever, I'm gonna do it on my own. That's really dangerous, that's difficult, right? That's the exact opposite of what Stan is trying to teach us to do. That's why you need a community, to say you don't need to do that on your own. What Chris is saying, there's some lessons, those of us that are older, we got some gray hair, we've been through this stuff, we know we can help a little bit, right, to lighten the load for you. Let us do that. But if you don't trust us, you don't see us as people like that, and that's an effort that's on us that we need to do that. And not all profs will do that. But just know that some of us are here that are like that. We want to see you do well. We want to see you excel. We know how hard it is, right? So I will leave it at that, and we'll say thank you.
say something to touch on what you said? At the beginning, when you were saying the advanced, general, and basic, that reminded me of the Milgram experiment, where they brought in regular people, and then there was a guy that was in a white jacket, pretending to be a doctor, and they believed what he said because he was a professional of some sort. So you're dumb? Okay, I believe that was dumb. So, and that was the Milgram. I learned that in my Science of Human Nature last semester.
No, I mean it worked. I'm still trying to come out of it because it does a number to you when you grow up.
It's a black and white
in
movie.
that.
You would think that it would have changed, but
Yeah.
but it's still here.
No, definitely.
So,
Thankfully you brought that up because before I introduce myself, who I am, and all of that, when you brought that up, the basics, and then how that kind of changes the trajectory of your life. When I was in high school, I went to Midland Collegiate. I barely hung on. And before then, you pick your schools. And I remember my good friend, who was like my only friend in school. I didn't have a lot of friends. At the time, I didn't find out until I was here at U of T that I'm on the autism spectrum, so it was always weird to people, which was all right for me, but it was kind of weird when you try and make friends and they want to distance themselves to you. So I had my friend Joy, and I had a lot of, as a lot of us, we had a lot of poverty. So I had that on top of that, and Joy was like my only friend. And then she was going to go to Midland with me because they had a pool. We used to go swimming all the time. And then her sister, who's a year older, went to Thompson. And then she last minute said, no, you're not going to Midland. You're coming to Thompson with me. And she listened to her older sister. And I couldn't get into Thompson because I was in a basic program. And only Midland had that. So then I was sexually assaulted in school. I ended up choosing the biggest, scariest male in the school to protect me from all of that. And I had my first child when I was 15. That child passed. Then I had my son Justin. And then kind of life took it from there. So I guess I'm Nichole. And that's, I'll continue from there, but yeah, my name's Nichole. I'm born and raised in Scarborough. I was raised with my grandma.
Yeah, Scarborough.
Right? That's why I wore my shirt today for all of our Scarboroughans here. Yeah, so Midland, right? Well, now it's not Midland anymore. They changed it to something else. I grew up all on Kingston Road, so very close to like Birchcliff's public school, all of that, right? But I was actually right across from that school. There's a bar called Cheers. It used to be called a fish and chip start. And that's where, when my birth mother left me when I was a baby, my father went back to live with his mother, which is my grandmother, who then became my mother and my grandmother at the same time. And for her, she came to Scarborough when she was a young woman. She came from the Madawaska and Matawachan area of the Ottawa Valley. She's a Wendat and Algonquin woman. And so I was raised with all of her cultural teachings that she had, what she could carry with her. So I kind of knew that, and I didn't kind of celebrate my identity as an Indigenous person because, like, we're in Scarborough. I got her. I have my friend Joy. And her family, I'm not too sure where her mom is from. Her mom, I think, came from, like, Nova Scotia, is a European family. Her father's from Trinidad. So Joy was always one who, she's still a good friend of mine. She's an elementary school teacher, and why she chose me is because she said, I remember you because you'd sit in classroom, and when we all went for lunch, you would pull out this big box of raisins, and you would just eat this huge box of raisins, and that's all you had for food, right? you know, for those of us who grow up without food, you know that struggle, right? So she used to take me to her house. And I always thought, like, why are you trying to be my friend so much, right? She has that nature of always wanting to be there and help. And to kind of not leave anyone behind. So when she left and went to Thompson, I was like, you're like gut wrenching me. Because my best friend and my only connection to like life at that age was gone. So, you know, I as I said, I had my children, dropped out of high school, started working at some jobs not long after my son was born. Worked at McDonald's, Money Mart, all those types of jobs without an education. And then from Scarborough, you know, you think downtown's like another land. Like I always was like, oh, I'm gonna go downtown to Toronto. Like their yards are like, where do they play? Like it's right by the street. Sometimes their yards have concrete on it. Like to me, in Scarborough, we have big fields to play in at recess and lunchtime, and you know, you have all of that. So Scarborough to me was like this crazy place. I mean, Toronto was this crazy place. And somebody said to me, there's a Native Canadian Center in Toronto. So go there. Because you know, you find out, okay, who are you? And there's a whole other story to that. And I remember one time being like, oh, there's socials there? New Year's Eve socials? While everybody's out there drinking and partying, there's a place I can go to that has a cultural space and community. And this is going back, like my daughter now is 19 years old because I had a daughter after my son Justin. And Nazarene was like a baby, not even a year old. And we went down for the New Year's Eve social and it was amazing. Oh my God, there was so much like dancing, singing, and just everybody being together. Then I started to learn how to, you know, cultural ways, going to full moon ceremonies, started dancing. My son, Justin, who is my second born, used to go to Isaiah's classes. We used to teach our youth how to sing. And it's just to be a part of a community. So, and for somebody who like, all I had was my nan, and I didn't have a mom, I didn't have friends, our community here is like everything to me. It was so important. Then I started working there. Started working in the cultural department as a trainee, just go out for dancing. Then I left because, you know, contract. So then I went, and then a friend of mine gave me a job at Native Women's. Melinda, you know, that's where we used to work together. You know, and I used to be the receptionist there. I loved it because I could see everybody coming in and, you know, get to see everyone, community members there, just, we're all together, lunchtime, you know, everything was right there. Then I had Indiana, mine and Isaiah's baby. I was pregnant, so pregnant that I couldn't touch the table. Remember, when I was right at the table. And I went on maternity leave. And a friend of mine, our colleague, Emma, who was in the housing department, remember when she went on mat leave?
Yeah, but she's here too now.
Yeah, she's crazy, right? And Emma then went on mat leave and said, oh, can you come, our ED was like, hey, you wanna come back off mat leave early and take Emma's position, so I did. And I didn't know at the time that, remember like I would have blue fingernails when I was pregnant. I was asking my midwife, like, why is my fingernails blue? What's up with that, right? And I didn't realize until after I went back into that position to cover for Emma. I remember I was walking across the street, right? And I blacked out one time before. But then I was crossing the street and oh my gosh, it was like the most beautiful moment. Like we were right at Gerrard and Sherburne. So I was crossing Gerrard and everything just looks more beautiful. You know when Buddhist monks talk about like nirvana and how everything's beautiful? That's how it felt in that moment. The sun was just gorgeous. Everything just glowed. I remember being so happy crossing the street that the person who was stopped, you know, the car stops right there, they were like, hi. Like not go, I couldn't hear them, but they were like, because I was in such a blissful feeling. And then I turned across Sherburne and my cousin, I remember Candace, was working up in the she's the ECE. She called in sick that day, so I was like, let me call and check on Candace, and I went to call the phone, and I saw the phone as I was waiting for the lights, dialing the number, and then I wake up and I'm strapped down. There's a community member who was at the park looking at me because they were really concerned about me. I couldn't make out who it was. This woman screaming, all this chaos is going on. I can't move because I'm strapped down. They bring me to St. Mike's. They leave me in the waiting room because they said they thought that I was drinking. So, and you know, our community faces a lot of that discrimination in the healthcare system, right? So my cousin, because I called her, was real close by, so she came, and she's like, she came out and she saw me just there, and I'm still blacking out, right? My heart would stop and start again, stop and start again. And they said, oh, well, we're gonna leave her because she's drinking. She just needs to, you know, sober up. And she's like, my cousin's like, she can't, she's not drinking, she just left work. They asked, where does she work? Oh, Native Women's? She's probably drinking at work. Which is not true. None of us did that while we were working. So Isaiah comes now. By that time they put me in a room. Isaiah comes, my heart's stopping. He's alone. He had to grab somebody to be like, can you come and look at this monitor because her heart keeps stopping. Then I got medical attention. They put a pacemaker in. I'm now a cyborg, so it's kind of cool. And I tried to come back to Native Women's and do the work that I did before. And this is the thing about our life and our community and our work. I could try and stay in there to have a paycheck, but like, I wasn't doing well. I would sit when our women would come in and be like, I need a house, just came from reserve, or I just have a thing, I need to find a place, I need to do this, you need to move. I would sit there and cry out those things. I was like, you're going through what? Oh my God. And which sometimes is great. It's great to be empathetic. It's great to sit there and cry with your comrade and to go through those feelings. Sometimes we need it, but that's not what that position needed. That position needed a strong person who was going to, okay, you know what? This is what you're going through. I'm going to get this. And that just wasn't me at that time. And I love our community so much that I can't take up space just because I need to pay things. So I was like, okay, I gotta leave. I talked to our ED and I was like, I can't come back. I can't renew the contract. You're gonna have to find somebody else in that position. And Native Women's still strong, doing what they do. Somebody else was in that position, you know, doing the work for our community. And then I came here. How did I know about U of T? I like the same way I didn't belong. Like I was in the basic program in Midland, you know? I went there because there was a pool, not because I wanted an education, really. But I used to see community members. I knew they came here, they went to TYP. And I was like, what's that? How do we get? Ooh, I want to learn about stuff, right? I want to do that. So somebody who worked at First Nations House, who was a good community friend, said, come and think TYP would be great for you. I can't remember her first name, but her last name was Jacko. She would see me all the time. She's like, okay, when are you going to actually do it? Because even before, when I was still at Native Women's, I asked those questions, right? So she said, okay, now is your time. And I remember when we walked in for the orientation, we go through TYP, we look through all the past, what are they when you take class photos? And there's like Isaiah's best friend Chelsea as a little girl there with their parent. We could point out all the community members that have been there and where they are now. Linda's here, Emma's here. I used to sit in these seats not long ago in the same auditorium. I remember when I first saw Stan, I was like, oh my gosh, look good. Stan feels comfortable. Because that's the thing is that when you know you're a Christian, you're not welcome in spaces, you have to feel welcome, you gotta find what feels comfortable and what feels okay. And that was Stan at that time. I was gonna take sociology. Stan walked into the orientation and started staring at the building. And he looked kind of, you know, like familiar, like an uncle to me. And then came down to the front, it's kind of like this, read yo yes, and slammed it down. That's equity studies. I'm like, that's it. Bye sociology. And I didn't finish my degree here, the undergrad. And the reason why is because this pandemic, oh my gosh, it was crazy, right? Like, all of you are just coming back into it. And I work at Two Spirits now, Two Spirit people of the First Nation. And I love them. I remember when we used to work at Native Women's, I was like, what is Two Spirit people, what do they do? You know, I'm a receptionist, I gotta know what the stuffs are, right? And I was like, what do they do? I don't know. And then slowly, we have a new ED, Keith McGrady. I started seeing Two Spirits everywhere, always helping, but kind of in the background. You know, that safe person that's there. And things would happen in community, and they'd always just be there as a loving person in a loving space, a loving agency. So they posted 2 positions, and I applied, and I was like, I love your leadership so much that I'll leave my studies. And now I'm a coordinated service planner, because we're a partner of Surrey Place Center. I work with the Ontario Autism Program, it's an urgent response program, and I coordinate services for families that have children with complex special needs and who are on the autism spectrum, and it's like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I've been to some meetings with me. So I won't talk too much more because my partner's here, Isaiah. And you know, as I explained, there's Indiana that I have, and Isaiah being there with me. We met through community, right? Being a part, and we do so much work together. I'm a dancer, he's a singer. Everything, our lives are community, it is our work. It's all in one. It's all encompassing, as it is with you. So Isaiah.
How y'all doing? Come on, how y'all doing? I'm gonna introduce myself in my language. It's Bojo, Isaiah, Indigenous Cause, Wabije Shindo Dem, Toronto, and Nujaba. And what I said is, like, if you wanna like break it down how the English translated is, hello, Isaiah is my name. But that word Bojo, in our language, it has a huge meaning. It means a lot of things. And what it is it's kind of talking to our creation story. That word Bojo, it talks about that first sound, which comes from Chibia Bojo. That's the creator of sound. It's say there was that sound in creation, that shaker. It's kind of like how they talk about that Big Bang theory, right? That sound. And then everything started being created, right? And there's another one of those Bojo brothers, that's Wayne Bojo. That's the one who heard that sound. And they say Wayne Bojo is still creating to this day. That's why the universe is so huge. That's what I was taught at a very young age. And then the third one that we're talking about is Nana Bojo. If some of you guys have heard, that's kind of like some people call him the trickster, or he's one that kind of started fixing things, going about things, and changing the way that they were created, right? And making animals different. And that greeting is just honoring that. It's kind of like when we say that to each other, it's like I can learn from you and you can learn from me. And it's that pact that we're making to each other, right? Is that saying that Bojo, and we're invoking those first beings. And with that, as Nichole said, I'm a singer. That's not my only job, but that's a big part of my life, and that's kind of what I was brought to talk about, was that life part, right? And with that, I'm gonna pull my drum out. This drum, in our language, they say, it's called Doyle-Wood. That word Ode, it means heart. So as I said again, it loosely translates into the heartbeat of Mother Earth. That name, right? That Doyle-Wood. And it talks about that birth memory that's in us, right? You hear that sound. And we hear that for 9 months, that sound, right? We're born in that sound. And that's when we're in our mother, that sound it's with us. And for myself, I know that it's always been a calling to me. That drum has always resonated inside of me, that sound. And I work at a place called Nichole Health, it's a native health center. And there's our traditional people, some call them elders, healers. They're the ones that talk to spirit, right? And my mom, she talks about bringing me there as a young boy. And one of them, he's a great man, his name's Adam. He's done many things all across, he's passed away now. But he was talking, my mom, I've had ear problems since I was young. So I couldn't hear very well. And he's talking to me and he says, sing me a song. My mom goes, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know those things. He's never heard those. He goes, hold on, I'm talking to him. And he goes, sing me a song. And my mom said I just belted out a song right there. And from then he's gonna sing. He's gonna do that. And through the years, there's been many different people who've told me that. I was also given my first drum by another woman who worked at that organization, Nichole Health. Her name is Baisha Blondin, and she's another healer from Northwest Territories. But so for me, it's always been a calling, and many people have told me that. And my daughter, I used to carry her on a Snuggie. I don't know if you guys know that, one of those things you carry out. But I carried her around in that all the time, and we'd sing around the drum. And it gets kind of loud. It can be, as you heard, just that one drum is kind of loud, right? And there'll be like 6 other guys singing around the drum, and she'd pass them. So that drum, it soothes us. It soothes our soul. I would even go into her room when she would cry. And normally we do this at the beginning of any, like if we're having a talk or we're having a gathering or something like that, we'll have a song. I'm gonna do that now because that's something we do. It's just to call in good energy, good vibes. You know, it's just to honor everything that you guys are doing, all the hard work that you guys put in, all that, and then I'll talk a little bit more. All right. it's a really big thing and a great honor for me to be able to share like a little that song and just a little bit of this, because my grandmother and grandfather, they're both residential school survivors. I'm sure most of you have heard about those places and the things that happened to those ones there. And for me, it's affected my life tremendously. One, because that little bit of language that I was able to share with you there, that's I have a little more knowledge than that, but that's what I have, right? I only have this small bit of this big language, because they were both fluent, but they didn't want to teach their children because they were scared of what happened to them. They were scared of the things that they were put through. They were scared of the things that were said to them. They didn't want their kids to go through that. Even, I remember being a young man, like maybe 6 years old. Because I grew up here in Toronto, right? I was born and raised in Bleecker Street, 275 Bleecker. You guys know that? Not the nicest area, but that's home to me, right? Is this city. But at the age of 6, I was moved back to the reserve, and at that time I had long hair, as I do now. And my grandfather, it didn't affect me the same way as it does now, because I didn't understand him, right? I didn't understand who he was. I didn't fully understand what he went through, right? But he told me as a little boy, he goes, "Cut your hair, you look like a girl." And what it was to me, I was like, oh, my grandpa thinks I'm a girl, okay, I'm gonna cut my hair. But I didn't understand that he was already gone through that. He had already had that happen to him. He had already had them beat him, do those things. And to me, those words hurt. Just that little bit from him, right? So now to have that recollection and to be like, I see why he did it, right? And I understand why he did it. But a part of that after he passed, I grew it back, because it was to claim that back, right? To claim what was stolen from him, right? Even these songs, it was to reclaim what was done to them, right? What they weren't allowed to carry anymore in this culture. And to be able to even do the job I do today as it's an Ashka Bewis, that's a traditional helper. And what we do is we work with those medicine people, and we make sure that we can still perform ceremonies to this day. And so that our community has those safe spaces, like we run sweat lodges, we do, which is purification ceremony for our community members. And I've been going to Nichole Health before I was there, right? Like, as I said, I talked about being a little boy going there. And now to be able to help other people in that way is a great thing, and it's wonderful, you know? And that community and that work, it's all in one for me and for us. But I hope I was able to give you a little bit of understanding, a little bit of something. But I could go on and on. But thank you very much.
We have about 10 minutes, a little bit more questions. Comrades.
Well, it's not more like a question, it's more like you know what, I was deciding whether to come today because I'm going through stuff. So anyway, but now I see you support, and I think it was a sign why I had to come, because I can touch on every single one of you guys. Advocacy, I was actually just talking about that with my therapist, that it's a very lonely world. But I think I was born to be that. And as for my friend over here, I know about the streets and how hard it is to grow up. now I'm 54 and coming back to university, and I am. I think I was meant to be here today to convince me not to leave, because I was not going to actually come back. So I can't even. Thank you.
I guess regarding the Bush protests in '97, you talked about the walkout. So I'm wondering why nothing more, I don't know, substantial was done. Like a walkout is important to raise, but the university really hasn't changed their stance since then. They've even gone worse about this type of stuff.
So I think there's always, it's a tough question. There's always, you can't look at the one thing, right? It's how do we keep building knowledge from the past? And university, even when you think about the loss, right? Even if you lose, it's about how do we build this other knowledge for future generations, which is the problem, doesn't happen. And number two, is no such thing actually as a loss, right? Every little thing leads to some form of victory later on. And I think that's what the problem is. You can't look at it as just simply Bush and that one protest. But what's happening right now on campus that we could learn from these lessons in the past to try to inform what we do today. So that's the way I would try to look at that. And I hope that answers that as well too, right? You want something else? Say it.
I mean, do you think that people really have learned from those? Because the protests right now are, in my opinion, very weak.
Why are they weak?
They do like the dying, which is, you know, you're kind of appealing to their emotion, which is not something that these people really have. You're asking for them to boycott and divest, which is not something that they're going to do. When we can do something with a little bit more power, we withhold money, not go to classes, professors could
Strike?
Yeah.
So striking takes organizing, right? Striking just doesn't take a conversation between me and you. You've got to be building, doing class speaks. You've got to keep building your organizing. You've got to build consciousness. You've got to learn what people in Quebec have been doing. And that has not been successful in our campuses. Partly because of the so-called conservative culture and the fear that exists. But it takes real hard work to do so. And I think even if you have small numbers, and this is just my personal opinion, people should consider it, right? Even if you don't have a mass mobilization. But the problem is that I think people aren't being able to do the willing to hard work, number one. And number two, I don't think it's about trashing what other people are up to. You know, whether you're looking at the apartheid work, right, and the divestment from apartheid, university did do that, tobacco, now fossil fuel. Now the question I think also as I reflect on this stuff is the role of capitalist education in general. So it's about trying to think about these things, not just really a victory, but how do you use a tool to challenge the way that we look at our education system as a whole. So, yes. Oh, Stan? Yeah.
Just wanted to, I wanted to, then, you know, before we finish, just to have Comrades, you talk also about your organizing work, right? Because I think that the question, right, and the conversation is going to that, what is organizing, right? And all of you Comrades do incredible work, and you have been doing for years. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
I will start back just really quickly about farm work organizing. So I've been organizing farm workers since I was 25, 24. And you gotta understand, if we did a general strike, well, actually, we're still dealing with wildcat strikes and what happens. Because those peeps, when they do a wildcat strike when you withhold your labor, what happens is those guys get fired, they're sent back home, and they're not gonna come back again. So you've got to really understand what the implications, if you're going to call for revolutionary action, what are the implications not on you? Because sure, you can go to jail or you could face other stuff, but if the people you're organizing with, their lives are going to be destroyed, then what do you accomplish, right? So it's if you're organizing the work, if you're doing the strikes, if you're doing this type of work, what type of both material and immaterial ways you're going to support people when shit hits the fan. And that's a lesson I don't think people have learned, right? I want to be clear, when we're doing stuff, I have a particular vision of what I want to see with farm workers. We may not get there. And to be honest, it's irrelevant what I want, right? If the peeps on the ground are finding different ways to resist, to hold back their labor, it's thinking about how do you work with them. And it may not look at what we do in Toronto, right? It might not have about 10,000 people coming up. But if it's 5 or 10 people, finding a way to go slow, or 5 or 6 Caribbean workers talking to Mexican workers or Guatemalan workers and figuring out how they can come together to take on their boss, that in itself is a victory itself too, right? So this is the thing too, in a safe space like this, I would be one of the people, I would love to disrupt things. But when you're working with communities which are marginalized, I know that anything you can do will destroy their lives. You gotta kind of really think and work with the comrades to figure out what's gonna happen. But I'm more than happy to talk and reason with you about this stuff.
He's being too humble. You should tell him, like, you have big things happening. Well, what's going on? There's lawsuits.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
we're
Like,
seeing-
he's not just.
Yeah.
He's being very modest in terms of what they're doing. I mean, it's one way of fighting back, but you're actually hitting a lot of people where it hurts. You should tell them that this is what happens when you get organized and you press and you're consistent.
Yeah, over last couple of years have been a lot of wildcat strikes. When a wildcat runs against people withholding their labor. So it's trying to get those different people who've done it, if they're still in the programs or not, the farm programs, to come together to see what we can do as a next step. It's not us doing this. I want to be clear, right? People are like, these outsiders are coming to this work. No, these are the workers actually coming up on their own time to do this type of work. So we're basically have a bunch of the legal cases to support those workers. We're going to be suing Canada for $500 million. Hopefully that figure is going to go up higher. But it's not just simply a legal case, right? I want to be clear. The law itself alienates you. But it's about trying to do with the workers to build their own narrative, right? So we're doing a tribunal in New York City this weekend. We're going to have peeps joined by Zoom and YouTube, both current workers and former workers. We're bringing people from Canada, Jamaica, Trinidad, workers from across the United States together to talk about some of the issues of commonality and to break these divisions. But it's long work, this is a long-term fight, right? And I think it's thinking about how do we keep building. And even if the big action happens, and what do you do after those big actions, right? When people are they're demobilized.
You brought such a great point in it, and then it brought me back to when you were speaking about how the university teaches like the individual instead of like what are you doing out there afterwards, because the having the mindset to be able to even think, wait a minute, how is this going to harm this action I'm doing, and is there something I can't see that's going to cause harm? To have that mindset is so important. I worked with ESN when the encampment support network was going on, and why Isaiah and Les Harper were all going to Moss Park and just having ceremony there. And then we'd see ESN doing their work, and then they were like, are you gonna come, you gonna join? I was like, what are you about? Like, what are you doing? And then I found out that like, they were formed, and the whole foundation of it is from those who are in the encampments themselves, who are unhoused, who have built their homes on the land there. And then we each had everyone, so everything was directed by them. And then even to the point where now they're coming and supporting 3S, and it's just the vehicle too, and how that happened, and then to see how that kind of dismantled itself afterwards. But it was always, that was the main focus, is you're not speaking for them. You're just allowing the space of mutual aid and care to happen and fulfilling a need. Yeah. And so like that you brought that up, that's huge.
And it's like lessons, like hard lessons learned, right? Definitely. Maybe one last thing. If I were you, check out ASSE's work, right? You know ASSE? ASSE? Check out what all the comrades in Quebec did and the stuff they did to try to organize a strike back in 2010 or 2012. Those walkouts, and I think we still have a lot to learn from all of them.
We probably have time for one last question. Okay.
How can we continue this conversation? And also, what courses do you guys teach that I can, because this is definitely being a pathway.
Yeah, we need to go into our comrades' courses here. Yeah. Good.
Well, I'm grateful for this comrade here. I'm teaching Caribbean foodways, and I'll teach that next year. I don't know what time. Through Equity Studies, CSE270, and there's going to be a new course on food labor in the second semester And if you want to take a first year course, you're more than welcome.
I teach. I used to teach a lot. My contract, I used to do 6 courses. Now I'm stuck to. When I say stuck, it's a good stuck. It's a reduction. But I don't get to see as many people as I used to. I used to be like the main contact for all Caribbean studies students. From first to 4th year, like people got tired of me. But now I just do the intro class. So I'm like the salesperson to pitch. It's a high pressure job to get students to stay, or not stay, but to take it. So I do that, and then I'm gonna be doing community engaged learning. I don't really know what that's looking like. That's a new part of the job, so I couldn't give you details about that. But we're around, even if you're not in a class. Like this is another thing. Like we're around. Like that's the thing about community, is that you don't need to have a formal affiliation or invitation to come and talk with us, right? So I'll give that to everyone as well. Like we're all busy, and the students that I have know I'm not the best with email, but I will get back to you. It just might be in 2 weeks. No, I'm joking. But that's the only way things can start, right? Like that's the only way. If you don't reach out, I don't know you want to talk to me, right? And I'm happy to talk with anyone about anything, right? So whether it's about what's going on, or if it's like scholarships, or I fucking hate school, you know, stuff's going down at home, or I've had like all kinds of stuff, like, you know, very, you know, straightforward stuff to emergency stuff. Because that's the thing, a lot of people don't know that we know things as well, or people, we might not know, but we can try our best to help you. If we don't, we can ask somebody and they can help. So look at us as like a support in that way. You know what I mean? Because that's often, it doesn't normally happen that way.
Just not a professor, but as a former student in these things, Stan, you know, I would come to you and be like, who's safe, who's on the same line, you know me, you see the work that I give you, who do you recommend, and then connecting me to great professors.
Because we've all seen that as a way to defend you, right? And you are part of we as a collective. So that's been our commitment and our conviction that it comes back up we, right? We're at 5 now. I think there might be a class afterwards here. I will say, if you sensed it and sensed the vibe, there is a powerful humbleness, right, within our comrades here, and that humbleness, right, is one of the central components, right, of the revolutionary consciousness. So I want to big hand.
I just feel like your story is